Good afternoon and welcome to the Museo's online author series. I'm Carol Latham, the coordinator for community outreach for the Museo Museum and Cultural Center in Anaheim. And it is our wish that you, your family, your circle of concern are all safe and healthy, and that you not only are safe and healthy now, but that you stay that way. During this afternoon's presentation, we will share the website links for each of the authors for additional information for their book sales, etc. If you have questions, feel free to enter them in the chat, either directly to the panel or to everyone. And just so that you know, this is being recorded on Facebook Live. It is my pleasure to introduce Maddie Margarita of LitUp OC. Maddie is a writer and host of LitUp OC, a popular writers salon in Tustin, California, on which her podcast, Author on the Air Network, is featured. She's on the board of Sisters in Crime and Southern California Writers Association. So this afternoon, we welcome you to get comfy and enjoy this presentation hosted by Maddie Margarita and some fantastic authors that she will introduce to you. Maddie?
Thank you, Carol, and thank you everyone for joining us today. How great is it to get a chance to see everybody sort of in person and get to talk about books. And so on behalf of LitUp OC and our panel today, Peppur Chambers, Ed Aymar, and Shawn Cosby, we'd like to thank you for inviting us and welcoming us into the unique and special world of the Museum and Cultural Center in Anaheim, California. So we have some East Coast and West Coast people, so that makes it even more fun. So our three panelists today write in different genres and forms about difficult topics and experiences, and yet offer a ray of hope for overcoming the impossible. After having had the singular pleasure of reading all of your work, well, not all of your work, but all three of your, anyway, you know what I mean. I know that after today, everyone will want to run out and buy something or anything that you've written. So we're going to kick things off with a brief round of self-introductions, and maybe you could share a little bit about your book or your most current story or your passion with our audience. So who wants to start? Ed?
I was hoping you were going to say Peppur or Shawn, but that's Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming today. And thank you to Maddie and to LitUp for hosting this series. Really appreciate this. My name's Ed Aymar. I write under E.A. Aymar, and my new book's coming out under a pseudonym E.A. Bars. It's called They're Gone. This is an arc, and it's coming out in November, on November 10th from Crooked Lane Books. So I'm a writer and a columnist or a novelist and columnist based in the DC region. In addition to my novels, I write a monthly column for the Washington Independent Review of Books. I'm a former board member of the International Thriller Writers, and for years I ran a site called The Thrill Begins on behalf of that organization, which is a site full of online resources dedicated to aspiring and debut writers. And in addition to that, I also run the DC Noir at the Bar series. And ever since the pandemic started, that's moved virtually. And it's been a lot of fun. So thank you again for having me.
I still want to know what Noir at the Bar is like, not being at the bar.
It's fine. Everybody's drinking pretty heavily at home.
I know, yeah.
So, we really get the sense and the atmosphere. It's funny because it's a very communal kind of experience. It was a really warm thing when it started, and it still is, but the necessity of it, of that human connection, was really brought across. So that's still there. It's fun to do.
Okay, well, great. And I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to participate in the debut author advocate series. That was great. I appreciate that. Yeah. Okay, and then Shawn, why don't we go to you next?
All right. My name is Shawn S.A. Cosby, and I'm the author of the novel Blacktop Wasteland. I am a writer from Southeastern Virginia. I guess I should say I'm an award-winning writer because I won an award last year, and I still can't believe it. It's like I'm so afraid somebody's gonna come and take it back. Um, and when I'm not writing, I'm generally, as Ed said, drinking heavily nowadays. Don't mind my David Lynch paneling in the back. And I'm so happy to be here, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Okay, great. All right, why don't we move on to Pepper? Last but not least, Pepper. You're muted.
Last but not least, I got it. As said, my name is Peppur Chambers. I'm originally from Kenosha, Wisconsin, which we all know has been in the news lately. I live in Los Angeles, and I am a hyphenate. I'm a writer at my heart and my passion, but I also do theater, and that brought about the love of the book that I wrote called Harlem's Awakening. And it's a 1940s fiction book about a woman who's abducted into a brothel and she has to dance her way out. And so I created a dinner theater show around the same theme, and I created a whole brand around this book and the Brown Betties. And I'm currently working on the second one, and it has taken almost 5 years to finish this second one. So that's what I'm doing now. And also working on, I was recently awarded a residency at the Squire Foundation in Santa Barbara. And there I started working on an ancestry project about a woman who comes out of the sea, out of being called by all of us to wonder where we came from. So that's pretty much me.
Wow. Okay. Can you talk a little bit about Brown Betties?
Oh, yeah. Brown Betties is the brand I talked about that I started in 2005 as a dinner theater show. And the Brown Betties has morphed over the years. I ran the show for about 10 years here in LA. We took it to New York and to Atlanta, about a woman looking for love in all the wrong places, which is what I was doing very well at the time. And I created the Brown Betties as the 4 women who played the characters of love, hate, want, and need, which are all of the things that you go through when you're obsessed over someone. And our tag is sultry, sassy, and sophisticated. And we danced in our underwear, and I wanted to show Black women doing something empowering and beautiful. And it grew into something that I never thought when it first started. And so now today, fast forward to 2020, we're a women's empowerment brand. I do women's workshops. I writing other books. And then of course the Brown Betties appear in this book and will continue on in the next 2 series.
Okay, great. How exciting.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thanks.
Shawn, we're going to start with you. When you did your introduction, you neglected to mention something very exciting that happened to you just recently. So rather than you having to try and work it into a conversation uncomfortably, I thought I would give you a chance to share that right up front.
Oh, I was going to plan on working it in regardless of the comfortable. I'm going to keep saying, I'm going to use it for the rest of my life. No, last night, James Lee Burke and Stephen King were in conversation on a live stream for Murder by the Book, the bookstore. And Stephen King recommended Blacktop Wasteland. He called it a fantastic novel. And after I was resuscitated and came back to myself, I was incredibly moved, and I'm incredibly humbled by that. I've been a fan of his since I started reading. And so for a poor college dropout from the hills of Virginia to be mentioned by one of the greatest writers of the 20th century, it's not a bad thing. Not bad work if you can get it.
Yeah, not bad at all. So do you want to talk a little bit about Blacktop Wasteland and the story, and give everybody like a feel for it?
Yeah. Blacktop Wasteland is a crime novel about Beauregard Bug Montage, an African-American auto mechanic living in the rural southern part of Virginia. But in a previous life, he was a getaway driver, but he left all that behind, settled down, had a wife, had 2 kids. He has a child from a previous relationship. He's responsible for his dying mother, who's in a nursing home. And as the book opens, he is under a tremendous amount of financial strain. His auto mechanic shop is going under. His mother's about to get kicked out of her nursing home, and his children need what children always need. And so he is tempted to return to a life of crime. And so it is about crime, and it's a fast-paced thriller. There's a lot of action and gunfights and whatnot. But it's also a story about a man trying to decide who he is, and about finding his identity, and especially difficult proposition when you're an African American man in the rural South, as you know, with the things that are going on now and that have always gone on. And so it's definitely a story that's very near and dear to my heart. And I've just been, I'm just so grateful that a lot of people seem it resonates with a lot of people, and it seems to connect with a lot of folks.
I think too, not only the cultural challenges in that book, but also the gender challenges and gender roles in terms of masculinity and, you know, for young men and even older men coming into their own and try to figure out where they fit in.
Trying to navigate the realm between toxic and tragic masculinity, trying to decide what it means to be a man and what that means for each person individually, and how the decisions we make now affect the generations that come behind us. You know, the sins of the fathers visited upon the sons and whatnot. And so, like I said, it's definitely a very personal book for me, very cathartic to a certain degree. And like I said, I'm just glad that people seem to be enjoying it.
Okay, good.
I have to say, if it's okay, I just got to echo what everybody's been saying about Blacktop Wasteland. I had the chance to read it right before it came out, and it's so good and so fantastic, and really just captures so much about a terrific crime novel and a terrific novel in general. I can't recommend it enough. Even though Shawn,
thank you very much. I appreciate that.
And that's one of the things I think you'll see, particularly with our panel today, is the generosity of writers and helping each other and helping to get the word out, particularly now when it's so difficult. You have this book that you put in years and years of work into, and then to have it be released in a time when you can't even go to a bookstore and you know, have people sign it and feel the validation of all that pain is particularly difficult. So it's nice that the writing community has kind of bonded together to do that. So I know this is particularly difficult also for Ed, because Ed is usually in my spot and, you know, runs things and whatever. So now he's on the panel like Noir at the bar and coordinate things. But when we went through the books, you didn't talk too much about the story in They're Gone.
So it's a story about two women whose husbands are two women of different backgrounds. One's a Northern Virginia housewife, the other is a Baltimore bartender, and their husbands are killed the same way, the same night, and their search for what happened for different reasons brings them together. And
this is set by you, right?
It's what, sorry?
It's set in where you live, up in...
Correct. Yeah. It takes place in DC, Virginia, and Maryland. So the three regions here, especially, well, Northern Virginia really, are so interconnected that, you know, it's hard to write about one without mentioning the other two.
Okay. All right. So, Ed, since we're talking to you, you write what by all accounts, like dark emotional thrillers. Which is hard enough just to write the straight thriller, but there's also a good deal of humor in your books. Wry, sly, dark. So first of all, so why do you do that? Why do you use humor in books that are so dark? Is it hard to do? And what is your biggest challenge in using humor in your books?
Well, I wish I could write humorous books. I think it's a skill that a lot of, I think it's one of the hardest things to do. And it's not something I can do. You know, I look at books, you know, by, you know, P.G. Wodehouse, or, you know, more currently, a lot of cozy writers do a terrific job of incorporating humor into their work. A writer Shawn and I both know well, Kelly Garrett, did this, you know, terrifically with her Hollywood Homicide series. Another writer, Sherry Harris, does it really good for her garage sale cozy series. I can't do that. I can't really take a plot and make a plot humorous. My plots are all about, you know, human trafficking. It's not, it doesn't lend itself to a lot of laughs. But I think that humor is a way to prevent boredom. And when I write thrillers, I'm very conscious of keeping the story moving. I want the reader to rush. And humor is a good way if you have a scene that you know has to be a little slow for whatever reason. You don't want to lose the reader in that, but you still want to add something to the characters. Humor does a lot for that. Humor is a terrific way in dialogue to reveal somebody and to see what they're guarding, because ultimately humor is a very shallow type of guard.
Mm-hmm. So do you, when you're writing this and you're hearing the dialogue and the exchanges between these characters, are you thinking, okay, this is a good place to put humor in, or do you hear that humor in the exchange in your head when you're writing it, or the underlying wryness in that? Maybe it's not, maybe humor is not comedy, but the humor in that.
I do, but you have to be careful with it. You know, one of the big mistakes that a lot of writers make, and I've made it, is using humor too frequently. You know, you tend to diminish the gravity of what you're doing. You don't want to, you don't want to have a really emotional scene and throw in a dick joke. Can I say that? Is that okay?
Yeah, you just did. Yeah, it's fine.
You don't want to go too far away from that. So I tend to put a lot of humor in, and then it's what gets cut out. You know, a lot of stuff gets cut, to be honest, but the humor is one thing in particular that you really don't want to go too much for, because as a writer, you don't, it's very hard, and I'm sure Peppur and Shawn can relate to this. It's very hard to understand how a reader is going to react. You know, you don't want to, you don't know how emotional, the kind of emotions that you're writing about are going to create in someone. And humor can be a way of diffusing that. So I really want to make sure that the importance of the story is never lost.
Right. Now, in Blacktop Wasteland, I found myself in passages smiling in spite of myself, which is like a guilty, nothing better than a guilty laugh. I always say. So when you were writing that, Shawn, address that same question that I posed to Ed. You know, how do you use humor in your books?
I generally, I think we write about pretty serious, heavy topics. I mean, you know, Ed's books are about murder and mayhem and the DMV. His Anthony nominated book, The Unrepentant, is about that. I was writing about Syria, a young lady that's been kidnapped in a brothel. And so I think we all use humor as a defense mechanism in our fiction and in our lives. There are passages in Blacktop Wasteland, even though there's a lot of heavy themes, that I either intentionally made funny or I structured in a way that the reader could take humor from it. There's a secondary antagonist named Ronnie Sessions, and he and his brother Reggie or somewhat of, I wouldn't say, they're not the comedic sidekicks, but they get some good punchlines but it's also part of revealing their character. Ronnie's a fast talker. He has a great patois, so to speak, of trying to convince you to do what he wants to do. And so humor is a part of that. And then there's situational humor, but as Ed said, and I'm sure Peppur can speak to this, you have to decide what kind of book you're writing. I mean, if you're going to write, if you're trying to be Bill Bryson, then, maybe you shouldn't have somebody get their hand decapitated or amputated by a car door, which happens in Blacktop Wasteland. It's fun for the whole family. But I think as a writer, you definitely have to put your foot down and cross a line in the sand, what you're trying to do. That being said, a little bit of humor sprinkled throughout the manuscript helped. A little bit of honey makes the medicine go down, so to speak.
Oh, Maddie, you're muted.
My husband would like to be able to say that, but no luck. But I think that humor can be a relief or a release in some of the darkness, so you're not constantly barraged with that. So you have that change in emotional landscape. And I think that, Peppur, you write a lot of blogs, and you write articles, and you write a lot of nonfiction as well as fiction, but it's so relatable when you read it. And so can you talk a little bit about humor in your writing?
It's funny as I've been listening to you, both of you guys, and I'm thinking, how do I use humor? I'm silly myself, so there's always something sort of silly, but I do, it's kind of what you said, and I have to use humor in order to get through pain, usually. So, and I like to make fun of myself, especially when I'm in pain. So I usually am doing something that is just a small dose, just something to help you get through it. And also I think humor helps keep things relatable. So if someone doesn't exactly know what I'm doing, or it has not had is not going to experience something that is specific to me, then sometimes I think unconsciously or sometimes on purpose that I can use a bit of humor that I know that that person would relate to bring them and keep them close to what I'm trying to communicate with them. So I think that's how I use it the most. And then I'm thinking in my book, one of the characters, I tried to use humor to say what someone else might be thinking, and like by calling someone a rat, or like they're trapped in a corner, but that's not so funny, but how a certain character might say it is how I'll find humor in that way. Like I'll try to find a way.
Dialogue and
Yeah.
So these stories, everybody's writing what feels like either personal stories or stories that have some intrinsic value to you. Does anybody want to take that question? Why did you choose to write these stories now? The story that you wrote?
I'll go, or do you want to go, Essay?
Yeah, go ahead.
No.
Okay, with mine, a little bit what Ed said, I wanted to shine a light on the Black women that are sex trafficked and nobody ever talks about. So I put my book in 1940s, I gave it the hint of sophistication, but I dealt with this topic that to me is obviously terrifying and that I worry about. So I wanted to talk about that. I wanted to talk about what it means to be empowered when you are not, or when you're in a bad situation, like using what you have. And I think as a young girl trying to grow up and not feeling confident, I always knew, well, I have a good smile, like can that get me out of situations, or can it help me? And so all of those things, but are specific to Black women. And I just wanted to weave them in and tell a story that was about us, but that was still universal. So that was what I wanted, the gold that I wanted to come out of this book.
Okay, Shawn.
For me, Blacktop Wasteland was the final result of a lot of thoughts I had for a while. My first book was a mystery called My Darkest Prayer, and that was mainly me almost as a homage to the detective and crime novels that I grew up with, the Walter Mosleys, the Raymond Chandlers, what have you. Blacktop Wasteland was inspired by some personal things. My mother and father separated when I was young. Me and my father had a very contentious relationship for a long time, and fortunately, we've been able to. It was also, I wanted to talk about, there seems to be this misconception in some circles that the Southern Black rural experience is not a part of the Southern experience, and that there's this idea among neo-Confederates, let's say that they own the history of the South, and I'll be damned if that's true. And so I wanted to talk about the people I grew up with, the men and women. My family goes back 6 generations in Virginia. My great-great-grandfather was a freed slave, and so I wanted to basically show a side of the South that a lot of people don't believe exists. And that goes on both sides. There are, like I said, people, white Americans who believe they own the South, but there's Black Americans who believe that Black Americans in the South are somehow submissive, like we're all drinking Soma from A Brave New World. And so I wanted to show that, that we're not a monolith and that there's an intrinsic complexity, and it takes a certain amount of mental toughness to grow up in the, in the home of the Confederacy. In my hometown right now, there are 2 Confederate statues, one in front of the courthouse and one in front of the school. And so those constant reminders of the idea that there's a certain segment of society that does not believe that you have any worth, when the people that I grew up with have fought for every scratch and inch of ground that they've walked upon with blood. And so I wanted to talk about that, but then on a more personal note, I did want to discuss about what it means to grow up with father figures, but maybe not the father that you had by blood, but the fathers that are your father by choice, and how that affects you and how it affects you as a man. When you're already being looked at in a certain way with a certain amount of denigration, and then you have to try to find your way. And so, yeah, Blacktop Wasteland, it started out being a crime novel, but it became very, very personal to me, both, as a Black person and as a Southerner.
Okay. How about you, Ed? You want to weigh in?
I do, but I have a question. Is that okay for both Peppur and Shawn? I was wondering, given that you both talked about writing stories that aren't often illuminated, it seems to me that for both of you, for Shawn writing about the Southern Black experience and for Peppur writing about the experience of Black women, that there's like an American view of the Black experience, and it tends to be, it seems to me, it tends to be male Northern experience. Have you found that, or do you find that the stories you're telling are included in that as well, or?
I'll let Peppur go first.
How do I answer? I also answer by the opposite ways by saying that I feel excluded a lot of times. Like if I want to see myself in something, I have to go search for it. I'm just not sort of automatically somehow included when I feel that I should be. So I wanted to write about someone. I wanted to put something into the pot, to have more inclusion. And also I gave my character money as well in terms of like how we're represented. And a lot of people are like, well, how could she have all that money? I'm like, well, it's fiction. Why can't you imagine that she could have all this money? So I hope I answered the question, but yeah, I wanted to show something that we don't always get to see, because I feel that it's always the story of what you described.
I think, just really quick to answer the question, there is a certain amount of, especially in fiction and specifically in crime fiction, that, the window through which we look into crime fiction is, designed and guarded by, cisgender white men. And which is the case with a lot of society. And so I was cognizant of that when I started writing Blacktop Wasteland. I did not want Bug to be a sidekick, a token, a magical Negro, any of that. I wanted him to be a character with agency. There's a movie, I'm just going to reference this real quick. There's a movie called Wind River by Taylor Sheridan, a great screenwriter. And the main character is played by Jeremy Renner, who's a white man who's married to an indigenous woman. And I remember I was talking to David Pescawanalu-Wheaton, a great indigenous writer who wrote a book called Winter Counts, which you should pick that up. But we were talking last year, and I said, how much better would that movie have been if the hero had been an indigenous man seeking revenge for the murder of his friend's daughter, instead of that white savior trope that seems to be so prevalent in fiction. And so that was really one of the things that I wanted to do with Beauregard, is that he's a Black character, but he's not perfect. He's not virtue signaling. He's a complex human character with frailties and strengths. That is something that we don't see a lot. You think about it with Easy Rawlins, perhaps, the work of Barbara Neely. You were talking about Kelly Garrett, even Chester Himes, and it's rare. So I definitely was cognizant of that when I wrote the book. That being said, I'm a gearhead, so I got a lot of car chases in there. Because I love a car chase, man. That gets me going. But it's also a very personal story for me as well.
All right, good. And so, we've kind of touched on that. And I know, Peppur, you said you were born in Kenosha, and we all know there's a lot going on right now.
Yeah.
So how has that impacted you personally, and has it changed your writing or impacted your writing? That's the first part of that question. And then the second part is, do you think it's changed the readers who are reading your writing now?
Well, it's super emotional for me. So I was going to gather myself. But yeah, so how it's affected my writing now is, I'm obviously not the only person from Kenosha, but I try to be a voice of Kenosha whenever I can. And I feel that I need to represent and should represent who lives there and who I was growing up as a Black woman there. And, I have a lot of white friends. I have Black friends too, but the environment is very white there. And I felt lost, which is what this book is about too. I felt lost quite a bit, even more than I realized. So now my writing is, I with everything that's been happening with social justice, I have been speaking up more and saying this is, and saying like Black men are threats to society. And we have to accept that and move forward so that we can change it. And I didn't talk like that before because I didn't feel bold enough. I felt that I needed to sort of be silent, and I'm not being silent anymore. And that's how I know that that's how my writing has changed. And I also know, and I hope that they are listening now, that my high school friends from Kenosha that are white, I know that they listen, and I was a class president and all of that kind of thing. And I only say that because they see me as a leader and I've been allowed to be a leader. And it is up to me to keep to the emotions, like to be a voice and say that this is what we are going through and you have to hear it this way. We have to change. So I've just been trying to use my voice as much as possible, and that's how things are changing. And some of the stuff, and speaking of humor, like things are not so funny, right now. And I'm gonna have to take that risk to not, to just get down to the truth of things right now. So I'm definitely in transition, definitely. Thank you for asking about that.
Okay, well, thanks for sharing that, Pepper. Anybody else want to jump in? Shawn, Ed?
I was thinking, and I was going to throw a question at Ed, but I was thinking, Chadwick Boseman passed the other day, and I wrote a really long piece on Facebook about it. And it made me think about my writing in a different way, because, seeing him as Black Panther was the first time that I can remember as a Black man seeing a superhero. But not just that. You saw these people in Wakanda that never suffered under the yoke of slavery. Yes, I know Wakanda is a fantasy world, but so is, Middle Earth. And so it was wonderful and beautiful to see that, but it made me think about what I'm writing. And I don't mean to say that in a way that, I have to write about heroic characters. I have to put these characters on a pedestal, but it made me realize how important it is, not just for me, but if anybody that feels marginalized to have a voice, because representation matters. And so if a young person picks up Pepper's book or my book or Ed's book, talking about, Ed does a great job of writing strong, non-caricature female characters, that it matters. It matters to be seen, and it matters to feel like you're heard, and it matters that there are people who either look like you or come from where you come from. And so, those thoughts about Kenosha and about George Floyd, and somebody asked me, did I feel like my book was timely? And I said, it's not just timely, it's cyclical, because I wrote my book in 2017. It's always happening. So whether I wrote it in 2017 or I write it in 2022, it's still timely because nothing's changed to a certain extent. But I wanted to ask Ed a question. You wrote The Unrepentant, which was one of my favorite books last year. I love that book. It's an incredible, anybody who hasn't read it, is an incredibly Anthony-nominated novel. And now with They're Gone, you're using strong female characters. What do you feel is how do you feel like you get inside those characters' heads, in my opinion, very well, that you write, like I said, non-cardboard, cookie cutter female characters that are full of agency and complexity?
Well, I fuck it up a lot. The good thing is that my editors have always been women. My agent's a woman, and they don't put up with my bullshit. They call me out on places where I'm wrong, on stuff I'm not getting right, and you kind of learn as you write what to do and not to do. What genitalia you should compare to fruits or not. And that's the kind of thing that as a male writer, you really want to. There's a thing with writing and where a lot of people feel that there's unlimited artistic freedom, and there should be, and I don't disagree with that, but you have to be very mindful of what exactly you're saying, especially when it comes to representing anybody, but especially people outside of your own perspective or experience. So I think I've tried to become more and more conscious of that as I've written. But I wanted to also say to Maddie's question, and I think Pepper hinted at this, and maybe not, but it's something I felt, and I think a lot of people have felt, is that that this is a time sort of, and really for me since maybe 2017 during the first Women's March on Washington, people who've never necessarily felt incited to march or protest have, and I count myself in that. You know, I was always somebody who, you know, I felt like I was true to myself, but I was the kind of the quiet person in the room when bigoted comments about women or about you know, gay men or women were made, and I never made those comments, but I didn't rebuke them. I didn't laugh. I just sat there quietly, and that was an experience that, you know, shamed me. And I don't want to be that person anymore. And I think there's been, I've taken efforts to surround myself with people that I can learn from, you know, who I can sort of follow their lead with. I don't mind talking about race or writing about it, and I have to a pretty large extent, especially in my nonfiction. But you know, but it's our understanding of it's so changing, and so much more sudden than it ever was, and apparent, that it can't help but come into our writing.
Okay, so you know, as long as we're getting into fun topics like this,
yeah,
yeah, because who wants to use humor to deflect, right? Not me. So let's talk about the dust up that followed American Dirt. Get it, dust up dirt. Anyway, when you have writers who are writing about people or characters who have different cultural or gender experiences, and you know, Ed, you were just talking about that, but so what advice would you have for other writers who may be afraid or maybe concerned about writing characters like this? What advice would you have for them?
I'll jump in on that real quick.
Yeah, please go, Shawn.
Shawn, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
No, I was just gonna say, you know, Ed and I have had this conversation before. We were on a panel last year where a fellow writer that will remain nameless got really upset when somebody asked him about sensitivity of readers. And he was like, God damn it, I don't need a sensitive reader. God damn it, I'm not gonna do that. And I was like, sensitivity reading is research. It's all a part of the process. And if you're gonna write about someone outside of your own purview, you have to do the work. That's a part of it. To me, it's tantamount to laziness if you don't do the research. I'm writing a book right now about two fathers who are trying to avenge the murders of their gay sons. And these two fathers, one black, one white, both from the South, were homophobic when their children were being raised. They weren't really great dads. They were
I think we just lost you a little bit on your video.
Anyway, I was going to say, you got to do the research. I was saying, just do the research, because like I said, I'm writing a book right now about two fathers who were trying to avenge their sons who were married, and they weren't great fathers to their sons. And so I not just did research on Google, but I talked to people, and I compensated them for their time that are from the LGBTQ community. And I do my damnedest to make sure that I'm representing their issues the way I would want somebody to represent issues about the Black community. And so I would just say to anybody that wants to do a book about someone outside of your own, like I said, purview, you've got to do the research. You've got to put the time in.
I agree. And like Ed said, many things, surrounding yourself with the voices that you don't have, like Ed, having your team being women. I lived in New York for a while. I would sit on the train and I would listen. How do people speak? What is the body language? Don't assume. And I listen very well, and research, absolutely. Even for 1940s, I have to research what's in the woman's purse. You know, my grandma told me women didn't have any identification. So no, she didn't have an ID and all that stuff. I would use that same example as to how does a Black person speak from Wisconsin to Virginia. You know, you have to ask and you have to research and you have to do the work. And also, even it goes, I wanted to bring in stereotypes. I'm catching myself, like maybe how we talk about women's bodies or how we talk about Black men or anything like that. We can't just keep repeating the same sort of stereotypes just because it's in our head and it's interesting and it tells the story faster, shorter, quicker. We have to find different ways. And then, we've got to have responsible, and the research is the best way to do it, and to listen. Ed.
Oh, Maddie, you're muted again.
What a gift. Anyway, so we've all been on a lot of different panels. And on one of the panels that I was on, we were talking about sensitivity readers. And we were, the point was made that, and I can't remember who made it here, that even, let's say, using the African-American community, that there are differences and within the community itself. So having one sensitivity reader say, yes, this works for me, doesn't mean it's going to work for every African-American who reads your book, unless you get a committee. And even then, there are so many, it's so diverse. And somebody also made the point that, okay, if you get it wrong, that's where the discussion begins, So would you encourage writers who are putting books out there to take that risk, who are trying to sell their books today, to take that risk? Or if they do decide to take that risk, is there any kind of preparation or mitigation you could give them for what might come down the pike? Or
I absolutely would. I wrote a piece last year. I didn't read American Dirt, and so I didn't comment on it that much, but I commented on the controversy. And a guy wrote, I can't remember his name. He's really famous. He wrote like Tuesdays with Maury. He's like a former sports writer from Chicago. Now he writes for ESPN. Anyways, the people you meet in heaven, that guy. He wrote a piece about the controversy, and he said, I guess now nobody can tell stories outside their experience. I guess everything has to be, so and they named all these famous books that wouldn't exist. And that knee-jerk reaction to me is just kind of stupid. Nobody's saying that. Nobody's saying that you can't write outside your voice, or you shouldn't. You should. It's what writers do. You have to. I can't write not all my characters can be half Panamanian, half white men who are 45. And are slightly handsome. That's just not realistic. So what what you have to do is, you can't be trapped inside your voice, and I don't think you should be limited, but you have to be aware that as a writer, anything you write, and not just, stuff that touches on race, but stuff about geography, stuff about, every writer, Shawn knows it. Yeah, gender. Every crime fiction writer has had their weapon, if they write about a gun, called out by somebody who's a gun aficionado, who's like, what, that gun doesn't have a sight on it. It's going to happen. But as Peppur said and Shawn said, it comes down to the research. But I think you absolutely should do that, and I think it's part of. I think it's an important thing for the artistic experience.
Okay. All right, good. Peppur, were you going to say something?
I was going to say, yeah, definitely take the risk, but I think on the other side, people have less and less patience for when you get it wrong. So if it's so apparent when you've gotten it wrong because you didn't even try. That's the part that's more frustrating than people not taking a risk to write something they don't, they want to learn more about.
Okay, so be careful you don't make blatant mistakes, but nuanced mistakes are probably going to, or interpretations are probably going to happen. Right? Okay. All right.
Yeah,
so,
thank you. But you have to push yourself. You have to push yourself all the time. I think as a writer, if you're not pushing yourself, then you're stagnating, and stagnating, you're dying creatively. You're dying. Your creativity dies is what I was trying to say, but my mouth don't want to work. But I think you got to push yourself. And even if you make mistakes, if you, like you say, you make an honest effort to do the best you can, then people will probably give you a slight pass. But if you're writing a book, I don't know, like American Dirt, and it takes place in Mexico, and you have the people talking about miles instead of kilometers, it's gonna
lazy.
It's gonna go up.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the books that you like to read. What elements do stories and books have to have for them to resonate with you? I mean, writers are the toughest critics. We don't, it's hard to enjoy a book that you're not either comparing yourself to or trying to figure out how they did that or deconstructing it in every way, shape, or form. But what do the books that resonate with you tend to have or have to have? What elements? Anybody jump in?
So I was sort of brought up in a very classical literary education. You know, when I went to college, the classes that I was, sort of excused, I don't know how to say that, didn't like genre. So it was all your traditional sort of, literary form. And a lot of that, I've sort of distanced myself from that now, but I read a lot of books that really resonated with me and stuck with me. And the things that at that point that they were teaching that were so important were the elements of character. So if a book doesn't have a strong character, I just can't write with it. I need someone who is complex and engaging enough for me to follow, and that really is what carries me on. I can go with a poor character if the prose is really fantastic. For me, on a personal level, that's the second thing. Those are probably the two defining things I look for in a book.
And who are you reading now? What authors kind of represent that to you right now?
I just read Steph Chaw's
This House Will
Your House Will Pay, and that I thought that was so good. I really liked it. I was a little late reading it, like a year after it came out, but it's terrific. And then speaking of a writer, I was also late reading Tana French is somebody else. I read In the Woods a couple of weeks ago, and it's one of the books that that was so good that I was a little disappointed that I hadn't read it sooner.
Do you read outside of crime fiction now?
I wish I read more outside of crime fiction. I don't have that much time to read, and I'm not that fast a reader. So I used to read, now I'm at like a book every couple of weeks, which is really slow for me. And with the pandemic, my reading has slowed down even more. So I just don't have the opportunity, really. Mostly what I've read over the past couple of years has just been in crime fiction.
So what books do you pick out for your son?
The same.
The same?
No, he's no, with him, it's, I try to get him onto, reading other stuff. My folks were very liberal and lenient with what I read and what I listened to and what TV I watched. They really didn't put boundaries on me. I think they sort of assumed that, and they were right. I grew up listening to rap. That was that's all I listened to from a teen to my 20s. And my 20s, rap led to jazz, which makes sense because it borrowed so much from jazz and from everything from the freestyles to the music to the beats to the samples. And so that sort of happened. And with my son, I'm kind of similar. I'll let him read whatever he wants, and then hope that eventually it translates to stuff that, in my stuffy opinion, I like.
Yeah, Joe Clifford, like that, right?
Yeah.
I read a lot outside of genre and in genre. I grew up reading a lot of different types of books because I used to get books from a thrift store when I was a kid. So you could get 5 books for $1, but you had no choice because it was in this big bin. So I grew up reading everything from Dorothy L. Sayers to Theodore Dreiser to the biography of Peter the Great to Mike Hammer novels and everything in between. And so now I have various moods. If I'm in a mood for a strong character-driven book, then I'll seek out a book that has those characteristics. But I can read a genre book. I can sit down and read a plot-driven heist novel or mystery novel that the characters kind of wouldn't. I mean, I've read almost all the Agatha Christie novels, and those characters aren't jumping off the page. So, but for me personally, the thing that will make me put a book down or make me give up on a book is if I feel like the narrative and the characters are meandering and they're going separate places. Sometimes a book can have a really strong story or plot, and the characters don't seem to be a part of it. They're just window dressing. And then sometimes the vice versa. You can have really strong characters, but the plot doesn't go anywhere. A lot of literary fiction sometimes can bore me because it's just a lot of people sitting around drinking tea and having existential crises instead of doing something. And so that's what kind of will draw me away from a book or make me put it down and let it go. But like Ed, you know, I grew up in a household where it was just a smorgasbord of different types of reading. My mom is a huge fan of Greek mythology. My grandma used to love Harlequin romances, so I read a lot of them growing up.
Yeah, we're having a little, there we go. We're back, Shawn. Are you back? Can we hear you? Okay.
We could see him.
Okay, now we're back. Okay, Shawn, go ahead.
Okay.
You were right in the middle when you stopped it talking about Harlequin romance.
Harlequin.
Yeah.
Yeah, my grandma used to have all these Harlequin romances. So, you know, my 12 and 13-year-old pre-adolescent or adolescent, you know, really just wound up young kid would read all these, you know, I learned the word tumescent a lot and throbbing.
But can you spell it? That's the killer part. So
That's funny. Oh wait, you're on mute.
So you talk about the books that the impact that these books have had on you. What kind of impact do you hope that your books have on other people, on your readers?
Am I taking that? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I want to say the books too that I read just really quickly. There's this one that I read when I was 11 or 12, and it's called Every Little Crook and Nanny by Evan Hunter or something, I think it is. And same thing, we used to go to the library and you could get all the books in your backpack and take them home. And that's how I found this book. And it stuck in my head. And so I recently found it again on Amazon. And I am the same 11-year-old, like speaking of humor. And I think that book really affected because it's so funny and full of all these terrible stereotypes. And then, by the way, that was the other part. I was like, oh my gosh, the stereotypes. The only Black character is a hooker. All the women have big boobs, and then like all the men are gangsters, but that's part of the story. And I thought, oh no, trouble. But I realized when Shawn, when you're saying something is happening, it's quick, and there's all these characters, and same with it'll come to me in a second. But when you were talking about Harlequin, and I was reading, I love the stories where there was a lot of sex, and I was reading it when I was 15, and I shouldn't have been, but this is like how I learned everything. It was great. And then I'm also rereading White Oleander right now for the summer, and I love the style, the dialogue, and how she says so many things in like 5 words. So that's super inspiring. Janet Fitch. So that's what I'm reading right now. And what do I hope of my book? I hope, oh man, I love my book. I'm sure you guys do too. I love writing so much. So really what I hope is someone falls in love with the words as much as I do, and that they can, see and feel what I'm seeing and feeling, and that they 100% absolutely can see, again, the Black character can see a Black woman in a way that maybe they hadn't, or just to imagine along with me, and to explore and to have passion and love.
I missed part of that. I think my internet was unstable. But Shawn, you talked about, or did you talk about how you would like people to feel? I didn't hear that.
Oh no, I'll be quick because my internet is unstable too. I want people to take from my books an understanding of a world they may not have been aware of, and I hope that they see that there's a complexity to people that they think are simplistic. And I just want people to enjoy it. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter what kind of message you're trying to put out if somebody doesn't enjoy the book. And I just, if it helps you, while away some hours while you're bored, or it puts a smile on your face, or you just enjoy the story, that's the main thing. I've been getting a lot of emails from people that are telling me how much they've enjoyed the book. And they're not talking about like the big metaphors and similes and narrative constructs. They just like the book. And that's, at the end of the day, I couldn't ask for anything more.
Okay. How about you, Ed?
So people sometimes get mad at me when I say this, but I really want my books to be kind of like fast food. You know, I want you to start eating it and then you can't stop. And then afterwards, I want you to feel a little uncomfortable. You know, I want you to think like, I don't know how I feel about
so
that.
silly.
But you know, and so I'm serious about that. I don't want to, and this doesn't mean to put down what I write. And it's the opposite. You know, I hope it's affecting. But I also want, and I think Peppur touched on this, and I hadn't really thought about it before. But you know, when you write and you're writing something that's affecting you, you know, at some point it affects you. You know, through the countless drafts and revisions that gets lost a little bit, but it stays. To an extent. And what I really want is for somebody to feel what I want them to feel, you know, and what I feel. If the scene, you know, is heartbreaking for me, I hope it's heartbreaking for the reader.
So what we have here is a panel of master manipulators.
Sometimes I feel that way.
Yeah, who take great pleasure in taking you on emotional journeys and ripping and tearing your hearts out daily. So that's great.
Yes. Excellent.
Yes.
With
Okay.
a little bit of indigestion.
A little bit.
I have to say, like growing up, I think I went from Nancy Drew to The Executioner. Anybody ever read the Executioner novels?
Mac Bolan?
Yeah.
Mac Bolan. Yes.
I grew up thinking I would marry Mac Bolan. So that tells you something about me. Okay.
Mac
Peppur,
Bolan
we need to talk. But Ed?
I read I talked about my parents letting me read anything. I was reading Mac Bolan and the Phoenix Force and Able Team, and my dad got, which was probably written by like some nut job conservative like think tank or something. My dad, I remember he read it, he was like, "Do you like this stuff?" And I was like, "Yeah, is that bad?" But I just got to say really quick to Shawn, that same conference Shawn and I were at where that writer went off on sensitivity readers, I met a guy who's now writing the Mac Bolan books under the Don Pendleton pen name. And he signed a copy of the book for me. He was there at C3. He's still writing those books.
I love those books. Mac Bolan and Remo Williams, The Destroyer, were like,
right.
They're like when I was a kid, they were like $1 at the drugstore, and you could just get 4 or 5 of them at a time. Plots make no sense at all. Not one. They make no sense at all. But they're like Ed said, they're good fast food. So
yeah, but talk about character, right? I mean, I was the only 7-year-old girl on my block that was reading The Executioner. So anyway.
That's awesome.
All right, so I think this is a good place, just before we turn it over to Carol for to curate, because we're in a museum environment, to curate the questions. Tell us what you're working on now, or what's going on that you think that everybody would be interested in. Peppur, you want to start?
I'll say Harlem's Awakening, and I want it for all the writers out there, because I've been beating myself up for all these years of how long it is taking me to write this book. And like Carol said, when we started, she's like, "What's happened? What's happening? You know, I've been waiting for it." I've been waiting to find out what happened to this girl. And the anxiety and the stress that I've been feeling because can't is not the word we want to use as writers. I have not somehow prioritized my time in order to get this book out sooner than 6 years. I don't understand why it's taken so long. So I want to encourage people to keep going and to not beat yourself up for how long it does take, but to also have a process within that. So I am working on the second book, and I know that there's a third, so this is maybe another 10 years before that comes, but that's what I'm writing along with the ancestor part, because again, like where we are in the world, I just want to tell as many Black stories as I possibly can.
Right. Okay. Thank you. All right. Who's next?
I'm working on a book called Razorblade Tears. As I said earlier, it's about 2 fathers, one black, one white, both ex-cons, who are seeking to avenge the murders of their gay sons, while at the same time seeking redemption for the horrible way that they treated their boys when they were growing up. It takes place in the South. There's a lot of murder and mayhem, and garden tools are used to kill people repeatedly. But I was going to say to Peppur,
that is a thriller fest pitch if I ever heard one, Shawn. Right there.
I was going to say to Peppur, don't beat yourself up about how long it takes you to write a book. Donna Tartt takes 10 years between books. She got 2 Pulitzers, so you're doing fine.
There we go. Thank you.
Okay, Ed, who's going to get murdered or kidnapped, or what's going on next with you?
Yeah, so for me, it's all about They're Gone right now. You know, I'm in promotional mode for that, and everything that I'm, you know, working on now that's coming out is all in sort of in service for the book. It's got, you know, it's either essays for different sites or interviews, stuff like that. And it's fine. You know, one thing that I would say if we're offering, you know, parting words of encouragement is for people to, we talked about reading outside of genre. I would say one of the things that I never thought I would be prolific. And I'm not necessarily prolific as a novelist, but I write a lot of nonfiction, write a lot of different essays, and I enjoy it. It flexes a different muscle, you know, and it wasn't the kind of thing I ever thought I would do, but it's sort of now kind of necessary for me. And if you're a writer, it's a good way to stay active and to sort of, you know, keep your stuff out there.
And stay creative. Okay, great.
That helps.
Okay, well, I think this is a good place to turn the camera, thank God, back to Carol. And we'll let you take it from here.
I've so enjoyed the conversations. One of the questions that came in from Barbara, she wanted to know, and I'll address it to each of you. When did you first know you wanted to be a writer, and why did you pick this particular genre to write in? Why don't we go with you, Peppur?
I knew my parents divorced early too, same as you, Shawn. And when kind of like at the parting of you know, my mom walking out, or that sounds terrible. My mom did not walk out. When my mom left, she gave me, she gave me a journal. And that's where I wrote my poems and my short stories. So around when I was 10, 11, 12, and I wrote my first play when I was around 12.
And why this particular genre that you've written in for Harlem?
Thank you. This genre, because Mom and I would watch old movies. I feel like I'm reincarnated. I love the 40s. There's something about it that is so just in me. And I just love the sophistication. And I feel that there's ways that we can tell stories using sophistication. And I love the clothes. I love the speech. I love style, everything about it. It makes me happy.
Somebody wanted to know, well, it'd be interesting to find out what was in the women's handbags.
Oh, I can tell you. I researched it.
I think it was, in fact, it was what James wanting to know about what's in a woman's handbag.
Grandma said you'd have a comb and you'd have no keys because your man or the husband would have had the keys, and maybe something makeup related, but you wouldn't have an ID, you wouldn't have a wallet, you may have some money, and maybe some change, like stuff like that. So also my purses were kind of small.
Okay. I hope that answers it for you, James. How about you, Ed? How did you know that you wanted to be a writer, and why this particular genre of writing?
Well, I started college as a psychology major, and then I failed out. So I reapplied, and they let me back in, but they said, you have got to switch majors. You are not allowed to study psychology. So I thought, well, English is easy. So I decided to do that. And then I
Are you crazy?
Yeah, right. Well, it was easy. Elements of it were easy for me, right? It was natural, but then you learn, you know, how difficult it really is. So that was sort of the first clue. And then when I graduated college, you know, after I failed out, I got a lot better. And then but I couldn't get a job. The job I got was answering phones for some company, and everybody treated me like dirt, and I hated it. And I thought, you know what, I'm never really going to be happy, I think, in a career that I don't make myself. And this is what I love to do. So that's why I pursued it. And I didn't start out writing crime fiction. I started out trying to write literary fiction, and the only parts of it that were good were the crime parts. And then I started reading more crime fiction. I got into Sujata Massey and Laura Littman and George Balcano. So I was reading writers really just from this area. And they were as good as literary writers I'd read. You know, so I sort of saw, and actually another guy, Nick Corpon, who was somebody I really admired for the sort of daring style he wrote in, and it was all crime fiction. So I sort of, it just kind of seemed like the perfect path for me.
Okay, thanks. How about you, Shawn?
My mother likes to tell the story that when I was 6 years old, I was irritated by the way a fairy tale ended. And I was so irritated, I didn't think it ended correctly. So she's told me, write your own story then. And I think she likes to say, like she said it in a very encouraging way, but I think it was more like, write your own damn story then. And so, and so I started writing short stories when I was like 8 or 9. And I didn't start out with crime. I wanted to be the Black Stephen King, but nobody wanted my horror stories. I wrote a fantasy novel. Nobody wanted my fantasy novel. And so what happened was I had a friend, this is a true story. I had a friend who was a belly dancer who went to New York City and met a guy named Todd Robinson who published a magazine called Thug Lit, which was a crime magazine that was published quarterly. And when she came back, she told me this guy needed people to write stories for his magazine. And even though I love crime fiction as a reader, I didn't think I could write it. And so I wrote a story called The Rat and the Cobra. And Todd Robinson was the first person to publish my crime fiction. And I've had the story published every year since.
Oh, fun story. So when you're writing, do you find that as you're formulating the characters, that they drive you or you drive them? How about you, Shawn? Let's start with you.
I think that I think the best, for me, I'm at my best when I'm letting the characters drive the story. I think you make a mistake as a writer if you do something in your book or in your story that you want to do as opposed to what the character needs to do. And so I always let the character, they're behind the wheel. I'm just along for the ride.
Okay. Would you agree with that, Ed?
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. There's a point where you're sort of, where you're writing and all of a sudden, something occurs to you and you're taken with it and it's exciting and it's different and you can't believe you thought of it. And that's sort of for me, the perfect part. I know that whatever it is, even though it seems wildly unconventional and not maybe even appropriate for the book and the story, it's the right thing to do and it fits in. So yeah, I think you need to have that. If you force it, then readers can tell right away, I think.
Yeah. And I love writing dialogue. So it's definitely, sometimes a speech is going to take you in a certain way. So I definitely get out of the way and let them talk. Same.
Larry wanted to know whether you all read James Baldwin or Malcolm X, and how did you react to those?
I love James Baldwin. James Baldwin he's one of the great philosophical thinkers of the 20th century. I read the autobiography of Malcolm X when I was 15. And both of those individuals, not just as an African-American, but just as a human being, changed the way I thought and the way I looked at things. James Baldwin is the erudite uncle that I wish I had. And Malcolm X is the tough uncle that I did have. I had uncles very much similar to him. So both those men and their words had a great, profound effect on me personally.
James Baldwin's one of my favorite writers ever. I went through a Baldwin phase and I don't think I've left. In fact, I read The Fire Next Time about a month ago and or reread The Fire Next Time about a month ago. I remember reading Giovanni's Room, which was his, it's so good. And I remember, as much as that book affected me, I remember the cover blurb for it, which called it an emotionally violent book. And I thought that's what I want to someday write. Someday I want to write something that has that kind of fire to it. I mean, Baldwin to me is, as celebrated as he is, I think he's, woefully under-celebrated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Giovanni's Room. And then for me, I want to throw in Langston Hughes because that was something more that I connected to and also the time period and all of that. I haven't read so much of Malcolm X yet.
Mm-hmm. I wonder, Pepper, if you also read a lot of poetry, because in your writing, I feel that sort of cadence that sometimes poetry brings. Would that be accurate?
I think a little bit, yes. Thank you, first of all. But my mom writes poetry, and so we would when I was little, there would be a lot of just afternoons of us writing or her reading out loud. She loves reading her poetry out loud to me. So I'm quite certain that that's what has affected me in that way. I don't have volumes of poetry that I read, or that I read today, for example, but it's definitely something about it that's in me.
Okay.
Yeah.
I hope that Peppur, Ed, and Shawn, that you're also looking at some of the comments that some of our guests have put in, because they've been extremely complimentary and making, like, for instance, Erin can't wait for razor blade tears. And, you know, so there are all kinds of wonderful comments there. I'm wondering also, are there any subjects that you, in your writing, that you find to be off limits?
I personally have my own limits as an individual. I don't kill animals in my fiction. I don't have animal abuse in my fiction. There's a great writer named Christopher Faust who has said that, the idea of the plot narrative or the plot device of a man avenging a woman's honor because she's been sexually assaulted, that needs to be, I think we as men have written enough about that. I don't think any man needs to write that. She calls it the sad daddy superpower syndrome, and I don't think any man needs to write about that again. I think women can tell their own story and have their own agency for that. Other than that, I don't have a lot of limits. I think the story earns the subject matter, and what I mean is you can write about anything if you write about it well.
Do you have any, and I'll just ask this question as a adjunct, do you have any regrets of anything that you've written?
Not so much subject matter, I just didn't do it well. I think there are stories that I've written, like my first novel, I love it. It's called My Darkest Prayer, and I love it. I just think it could be better. I think there are scenes, I think there's too much ogling and not enough narrative action in some scenes, and I regret that a little bit. But at the same time, it was a part of a learning process, and it was a different type of book, and I'm proud of it. I love that book. I love the characters, Nathan Waymaker and Skunk and all the folks in that book. All your books all your work are like children to you. And so I just, if anything, charge it to my head and not my heart. I could have done better.
Okay. How about you, Ed? The first question is, any subjects off limits, and then any regrets that you may have had with your previous writing?
So the two, this is a pretty common question, especially for crime fiction at conferences, because, what would be off limits? Because crime fiction writers are writing about, sort of heinous acts. And the two common answers tend to be, don't hurt the animal, because readers hate that, and don't hurt children. And I understand that, especially having, I have a dog, a bird, a turtle, and a fish, and I got a 6-year-old kid. But I would absolutely hurt a child or an animal in a book. I think that, I agree with what Shawn said. If you have to do it well, it can't be. I mean, there's terrible things happening, and both I think Peppur and I discovered this in our research in sex trafficking. I remember with The Unrepentant, somebody read it and they said, that's terrible. Is that how much of that's true? And I was like, well, I softballed it, because that stuff all happens, but it happens to children.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm not showing you as bad as it is. And to an extent, people aren't really aware of that. So what so I do think those stories need to be told, and need to be told well. And I don't, and I don't know if I'm the person necessarily to do that at this time regarding, animals or children. But I think they should be written. Do I have any regrets? I just fucking hate everything I write after I write it. I'm really bad about that. I can't. I remember listening to an interview with a rapper, and they were asking, like, do you ever listen to your own music? And he's in your car, and he's like, no. In fact, it's ridiculous to think about like a musician like listening to their voice singing and vibing along with it. And I'm like, yeah, I guess everybody feels that way, right? Like, I mean, I don't hate everything I write. I mean, don't get me wrong, but it's no one's harder on my writing than I am. So
Exactly.
It's very
Exactly.
hard for me to not
I
look
mean, I'm
back.
pretty hard on you, but
Yeah,
Well,
I can
and I will
always
say
edit.
that James also says that you should write a book of essays on fatherhood because your stories are all great. So, there is another opportunity.
I thought he was going to say something about hurting a child. I was like, no, that's not my life.
There's somebody else, I think it was, I may have just missed. Oh, it was Barbara. And she was saying, so she absolutely cannot stand it when a dog gets killed. So,
But forget about the people. It's okay.
No,
when the people get killed.
all about
Kill the dog.
the animals. So how about you, Pepper? Same question.
My taboos are, I try not to do blatant violence against women. I also, now I'm trying to be a lot more responsible about, again, I mentioned this, how I describe women. So whether it's skin color or size, and using the word hag, like I try not to show older women in a certain way that we're so used to seeing them. I try to make them much more dimensional. Just be having awareness more about how it's so easy to do that. So making that taboo in my own life so that I'm just showing us, all men and women, showing us better. And the blatant, I just don't like violence against women for no reason, and I got lost. What was the other thing?
No, just, no, I've forgotten.
Anything you've written that you regret?
Anything that you've written that you regret.
Yeah,
Thank
you know what? I wanted to be a famous singer. So maybe this poetry that we're seeing is because I was a songwriter for a while, and some of my songs are terrible. And some of them I recorded, and it's very embarrassing.
Can we find those anywhere, Pepper?
We'll see them on YouTube or anything.
Like MySpace, when I thought I was doing something, I don't know, they might be out there.
MySpace.
Okay, we have one question here from Nancy, and she wanted to know, in the process of rewriting, do you comb over every word to find a better one, or are you more concerned about the action and the pace of the writing? Why don't we start off with you, Pepper?
I do both. I'm a word person. I'm like, I know there's something better. And that's how I make myself work. So, Shawn, I thought you said, I'm constantly pushing myself. How can I say it better? How many, it's just that. Mm-hmm. So yeah, sometimes it's over the word. Sometimes it's over the word. And then other times I'm like, get out of there, just make it happen. So it's a little bit of both. But again, I love words. So I want to do something that sounds good, tastes good, all those things.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Ed?
I do both.
Oh, sorry. You want to go next, Shawn? That's okay.
I was going to say I do both. I pour over the word choice, over the structure, over the syntax, the structure of the sentence, the structure of the paragraph, how it looks on the page. Yeah, my rewrites are horrible. It's like the Tasmanian devil is in my office. I'm tearing stuff up and throwing my computer against the wall. But like Mark Twain said, the difference between the right word and the wrong word is the difference between lightning and lightning bug. And so, I'm hard on like Ed said, nobody's harder on you than you are on your writing. And so when I revise stuff, there's a 3-stage process where this is crap. Well, this is not so much crap. This is all right. And that's a circular cycle I go in, so.
Mm-hmm. So it's crap, crappier, crappiest.
Yes, exactly.
How about you, Ed?
I mean, I feel like I revise all the time. I don't know how many, I know some writers have certain drafts and things, and for me, draft numbers, I have so many. I have so many revisions, and it's hard for me not to. I always feel bad, like with They're Gone. I got the edits back in different stages. You get your initial edits, copy edits, first pass, second pass, and at each one, I'm like revising scenes and changing things. And part of that is because you're growing, right, as a writer, and that's good. I wouldn't want to be satisfied with something I wrote a year ago. But I really need to, it's hard to know when to stop. In other words, a writer I like that I think that Shawn probably knows, a guy named Steve Weddle, talked about he was answering this question in an interview, and he said, there's mathematical precision that you get that I think Pepper, was touching on with poetry, in a sentence. when it's weighted perfectly, when it's balanced. And that's a really wonderful thing to find. You won't have it in every sentence, but if you can have it at least once a page, I think you're doing pretty good.
Well, I think too, it's like an artist who paints. There comes a time when you have enough strokes on the canvas. Be done, because the next stroke is not necessarily going to make it any better than it is at this present time. So, how about you, Peppur?
Wait, which question what am I saying?
No, we were just talking about agonizing over rewrites and whether poring over rewrites as against agonizing.
Sorry, yeah, no, definitely. The rewrite, I like it actually. I see it as a challenge. I mean, I was an athlete too through college. So to me, a rewrite is, okay, how can I perfect? How can I keep going? So I want to make it better. So I get exhausted by it, and it's not exactly fun, but when I'm into the rewrite, I'm like, okay, this is the challenge. Let's go, put on your spikes and do something. So mostly I see it as a challenge, but it gets agonizing in knowing that, oh God, this chapter is so long. Like, when is it going to end?
And how about you, Shawn?
Oh, like I said, I tear it up because, like Ed was saying, there is a mathematical precision. There's a weight. There's a rhythm to dialogue versus sentences versus descriptive phrases versus internal monologue. Everything has a different weight, and I love dialogue too, and so I'll agonize over that. And it's a weird thing as a writer. The word or the sentence that's going to work. You just haven't found it. And so nobody else can get that for you. Nobody else can get there for you. Doesn't matter how many beta readers you have, how many people look at it. Nobody knows that tone or that rhythm that your story needs the way you do. And that's what drives you mad. That's what drives writers mad, is because it's like that scene in Amadeus when Mozart's trying to explain to Salieri how the music sounds in his head, and he can't, and he's doing everything, and Salieri can't keep up. That's what it's like for me.
Yeah. And that's kind of cool too, because then that gives me some bit of solace, because I know it's there. It's going to come. It may be next year, but I know the part that we're looking for is coming. It's exciting.
I also say that,
go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Ed.
I was just going to say, we talk a lot about the struggle, but the end point of that isn't something that we talk about as much. And it's not the kind of thing that writers should, I think you don't want to get too excited by your own writing, of course, but there's a point where you're so happy with what you've written. For me, it's weird because I'm scared of dying. I'm really scared at that point that what I've written isn't going to make it to anybody else to be read. And I keep myself very safe. I've been like in a pandemic 24/7. I'm just very cautious because what I've written is it's not the best thing anybody's ever written, but it's the best thing I've ever written. And that's really important for me to get out there.
I like how everybody's so emotionally stable.
Nice.
That's good.
No, go ahead, Maddie.
No, I would say I enjoy how writers are so emotionally stable here. and
I'm going to follow up on that too, because I'm wondering, you poured everything you have into this document, into this book, and then the editors come along, and then there's the change. So
I'm not so upset with the editors. I'll tell you what bugs the hell out of me is that you sweat and bleed and agonize over word choice and sentence structure and plot and character motivation, and then somebody comes along and like, I didn't like the cover of 1 star. That pisses. Oh my God, I lose my mind. It's like I didn't sleep for 3 days finishing this book. I was eating like Rice Krispies by the handful dry, and you don't like the cover? Well, I'll slap the taste out your mouth.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. That's really funny.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I think we probably have time for one more. And is there anything else that you might want to add that you haven't already stated during our conversation this afternoon? How about we start with you, Shawn?
Oh, I think I made it awkward for everyone just now, but
Not at all. Not at
I wanted to
all.
say real quick, we've mentioned some writers before. I wanted to mention a few writers that people should check out. There's a writer named Kelly Garrett, who's a great crime fiction writer, writes great cozy mysteries. There's a Southern noir writer named Eric Pruitt, who's also a great novelist. And there's a writer named Nikki Dolson, who just came out with a short story collection called Love and Other Acts of Criminal Behavior. Just want to give them a shout out. If anybody's looking for a really good read over the rest of the apocalyptic pandemic, check those writers out and go out and buy Blacktop Wasteland. So,
How about you, Ed?
Nothing that I want to.
If I could just interrupt for one quick second.
Oh, yeah.
Shawn, would you mind writing the authors of those books you just mentioned in the chat? There are a couple of people asking. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yes, Ed?
There's nothing that I don't think we didn't cover, so I think I'm good there. But I do want to say a writer that, Maddie had mentioned that she was featured in an advocate column for the site I ran, The Thrill Begins. The writer who wrote so lovingly about her is Sarah M. Chen, and she's working on a novel, and we should all pressure her to finish it. So if you see her, feel free to peer pressure her and berate her.
Can I double down on that and say, yeah. I think it's Cleaning Up Finn, right?
Yep.
I read that in one night. After she read on LitUp one night, I took the book home, and it's 3:30 in the morning. I had to get up at 6, and I read the book in one setting, or in one line. Anyway, you get the point. It's great. So if you want to find out about Sarah's work, pick up Cleaning Up Finn.
Yeah, and aside from, so I would definitely recommend her work. There's another writer that I like a lot. We talked about reading outside of genre, and there is one writer, a woman named Amber Sparks. That's her real name. And she, surprisingly, and she wrote a collection of short stories. Her second collection, both were published through a Big Five publisher, which is really rare for a writer of short fiction to have their first 2 works published. And I can't remember the name of her second, but it's all about female rage, and it's terrific. So I would definitely recommend Amber Sparks if you guys are looking for someone. Oh, and buy my book. They're Gone. I've heard good things about it.
Okay.
That's funny. I love it.
Any last minute comments from you, Maddie?
I just want to say, if you want to support our authors today, if you can't afford to buy their books, there are other ways to support them. One is to get them from the library and write a review. We love reviews. Writers love reviews, and talk about the books with your friends. Refer them to your friends and talk about them. So that's it. I just want to thank the panel. We had an amazing day. I knew we would, but it's been a lot of fun.
Yes. Well, before we close, I want to remind you, just as Maddie said, that on our website, there will be links to the authors, so that if you want more information as to where you can get their books, how you can support them, they will be available to you. In fact, it's just come up on the screen. There'll be a follow-up evaluation as well, so that you can let us know your thoughts on this program as we continue to bring you relevant programs to the community, especially during these times. To support the Museo, we also are grateful for any and all support. You can click on the donate button on the Museo website, www.museo.org, through the website, Instagram, or Facebook links. Your generosity is always appreciated. So for now, thank you, Ed, Peppur, and Shawn, for an enlightening presentation this afternoon. Special thank you to Maddie for assembling such an amazing, and I will say august, panel of authors. And special thank you to Burkinda in the background, who makes all the technical stuff work so beautifully. And special thank you to our viewing audience. We appreciate your taking the time on a Sunday afternoon to share with us and hear these amazing authors. So we really appreciate your time. And on behalf of the Museo, stay well, stay safe, stay healthy until the next time. Thank you so much. Have a good
Yes.
afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Auntie Lane. My aunt is on the call.
I